But let's close the decade with Brave New World and check on Mr. Anderson. He's getting bored. The follow-up to Catfish Rising is 1995's Roots to Branches, which goes even more in the same direction. A very oriental, borrowed ideas record, sort of like jazz bands used to borrow all kind of ideas from other musical styles and other cultures. So he kind of attempts to do that with Roots to Branches. The result is surprisingly good, and there is some English folk elements in that. I love Wounded Old and Treacherous, A Valley, a great song, Rare and Precious Change. The song, the title song, Roots to Branches, itself is good. So I like the record. It's a little bit kind of in limbo, released many years, kind of 4-year gap between the previous one. It ranks kind of in the middle, not too bad, not amazing, but very well worth a listen. If you listen to Little Light Music, you might be able to skip this one if you want to hear a little bit of a more specialty Jethro Tull, then you can get it. Next up is 1999's jtoll.com. I was very deceived. Ian Anderson promised that it would be released on record. It wasn't. It was only available in CD, maybe a cassette, I don't know. I was never really too much into cassettes. A good listen, and goes even one more step further than Roots to Branches. So very more heavily concentrating on the oriental specialty kind of record, and in this case I don't think it works that well in Jethro Tull's favor. So the days of making kooky and specialty and very different things are over. Nonetheless, there are some good songs on the record. Gift of Roses I love very much. Bends Like a Willow, not Pussy Willow. Pussy Willow is off of Broadsword. Bends Like a Willow, Far Alaska, Black Mamba, Hunt by Numbers. Good overall record, good sound, worth a listen here and there. I rank it a little bit below Roots to Branches, to be honest with you. And then another 4 years later, in 2003, they release an album which is not a full new studio album. It's called The Christmas Songs or Christmas Album. And he also releases there a solo album, Rupee's Dance. I forgot to mention that in 2012, in the 90s, he released another solo album which I heard once, but I can't tell you much about. Dances with God, something like that. And in 2003, around the time that he released his Christmas album, he also releases Rupee's Dance, which I don't even know if I ever bothered listening to it, but I definitely never bought it. Anyway, Christmas album is a good listen. Ring Out Solstice Bells. There's a lot of Christmas or Christmas-ish themed songs from their past catalog that they brought up, and it's a decent listen. Is the Christmas album really hands down better than Roots to Branches and jtoll.com? It's not very much different, but in my opinion, if you must only have one out of those three, let it be the Christmas album. It has some fresh takes on old classic songs. They do a version of Greensleeves. They do Ring Out Solstice Bells and all kinds of things like that. So First Snow on Brooklyn is a decent song, more than decent. But of course you could make the counter argument that you already know those songs and maybe go for Roots to Branches. Anyway, let's give Mr. Anderson a good rest And in my opinion, here ends the real history of Jethro Tull, or to be more precise, the history of the real Jethro Tull. After that, there was a fairly ugly episode, but we'll get back into that after we check out on our friends Iron Maiden, who are starting off the new decade and the new century and the new millennium with a big bang. So Brave New World was very well accepted by the fans and the press. And 3 years later, they come up with Dance of Death. And as much as I didn't like Brave New World, I was a huge fan of Dance of Death instantly. I had a feeling that they went back to the sound and the aspect of kinda the times of Peace of Mind, like that. So there's no crazy sounds, there's not super special sounds. The songs are great, they are solid, they are very enthusiastic and kind of forward driving. And they didn't do these kind of crazy proggy things that they've been accused of doing lately. Man, start to begin, the album is a banger. To me, Dance of Death squarely belongs in the first decade and even the first half of the first decade. So you could put it up there with Power Slave and Peace of Mind and Number of the Beast. It really feels at home like that. I know for a lot of fans this is blasphemy. You're not allowed to say that, and nothing will ever measure up to the first decade, or at least the first half of the first decade. But to me, Dance of Death is a banger of a record. I love Rainmaker. Love No More Lies, Journeyman, Wildest Dream, Face in the Sand, the Rainmaker. It's it's a great record. Pretty much every song is a banger from start to beginning. The title track, Dance of Death, has kind of a Fear of the Dark feel to it. Great record. Matter of Life and Death came out in '06, so 3 years later, again 3 year gaps now between records, which is normal, it's acceptable for the time. It's not a young band anymore. They deserve the rest. And again, how often it's not like the early '70s where bands used to bang out sometimes even 2 records in the same year. A Matter of Life and Death, I mean, the previous record had death in the title, this one also. To me, Matter of Life and Death is just a lackluster, a turn, maybe even tired record. I didn't like the production one bit. It's kind of muddy, sort of has a, what's the name of that producer that everybody hates him in metal? He used to be in rap producer, Rick Rubin. He's being accused of having ruined Black Sabbath's 13. Well, why didn't they fire the producer? But anyway, it has kind of like this dark, murky, muddy feel and sound through it. There are a couple of good songs, These Colors Don't Run, and some other ones. I don't remember it that much, but I did not enjoy this record. It's to me, it's right at the bottom, together with Brave New World and X Factor and Virtual 11. Oh, it can happen. That's it. The Longest Day. There are decent songs on it, but it just, I don't know. To me, it didn't do it. Next up is A Final Frontier. Again, a record on which a lot of big fans love to spit and crap, and a lot of people even have the same criticism that I have on Life and Death, but I don't hear it very much. Now, is it a bright 80s style production? Of course not. But in my opinion, it's definitely not as muddy and murky and dark as Matter of Life and Death. But again, I guess to each his own. I enjoyed Final Frontier, not my top all-time favorite Maiden record, not by a long shot, but very enjoyable, very listenable record. Here they start or they continue to stretch out songs and make them a little bit too proggy, and some people are triggered by that. I'm not opposed to it in principle, but if you do it, it has to make sense. It has to be good. On Phantom of the Opera, it made sense. On Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, it made sense. Sometimes here in these songs, it's a little bit too much. These kind of long, drawn out, quiet introductions. Okay, we get the idea. Now what? But again, in the middle, it picks up. It brings us again these galloping riffs and good, great soloing. So I guess the good parts outweigh the bad. But again, I think a lot of songs are stretched out unnecessarily. Just to be able to say that we made a 10-minute song or a 17-minute song, I think it's a little childish and stupid. But be it as it may, I love The Alchemist, I loved Starblind, I loved Avalon, When the Wild Wind Blows. There were a couple of songs that I didn't like, One Man King or something like that, Coming Home, or One Man Kingdom. I didn't like those songs. Those were a little bit too stretched out and lacking substance and imagination. But all told, I don't hate Final Frontier. And then they release Book of Souls, another record that goes in a similar vein. A lot of fans think or say that Book of Souls redeems the bad quality or the bad songwriting of Final Frontier. I don't hear it so much. To me, they are fairly close to one another. It has another aspect, another feel, another sound to it. Maybe they improve the songwriting. I wouldn't pick a hands down winner between the two. And do I lean to Book of Souls? Maybe. When I listen to Book of Souls, I lean to that. When I listen to Final Frontier, I tend to lean to Book of Souls. But again, these are not the songs that I listen to over and over and over and over again. And when I was a teenager and learn every note and every song and every word by heart. So it's a little bit more difficult to look at it. It's like looking at something from a distance. But I think it's a very, very good, solid record. Empire of the Clouds, Red and the Black, Death or Glory, Sea of Light. I think Eternity Should Fail, if Eternity Should Fail was the first song released of it. So I've seen the tour, they were in great shape and they sounded great. All in all, I think it's a good, very good record. And then of course we have the latest record, Senjutsu, which is also very good, and I also think belongs in this little group of the last three. So Book of Souls, Final Frontier, and Senjutsu. I loved very much the first single that they released out of it, Writing on the Wall. That was very, very good. And there's Parchment, another very good song off of the record, Death of the Celt, Darkest Hour, very great song. So I think that Senjutsu beats both Final Frontier and Book of Souls, not by a country mile, but I think that they addressed the complaints that the fans and probably the press also had against the previous two. When I first saw Senjutsu, I said, what the heck is this? Just the album cover is so un-Maidenish. It just, to me, it just doesn't fit in there. It doesn't belong there. But again, this is the package, what's around it. So you don't like the album cover, don't look at it. The album is solid, the music is great. They still do this kind of too proggy direction, but in this record it feels right at home. So they don't do so much long songs for the sake of long songs or drawn out passages that are don't mean too much. So great band, great albums. Iron Maiden if I wanted to say bad things about them, I really would have to dig deep and go into the dirt. And one of the aspects that I loved about them, that they were always gentlemen. Like I said, they took back this guy, didn't take back, but they left the guy in the band, this Yannick Jers, even though they didn't really have to. The split, Adrian and Bruce leaving, was done very peacefully and quietly, almost no drama, very little drama. Unlike some other bands that had to fling some number two all over the place, and I think it's not the real professional, not the real right way to do it. And the music is phenomenal, and they did very well for themselves. They had a great management. They had that vision of making a recurring theme, a mascot on all of their album covers. So all of that helped them. And there are people who accuse them of being too commercial. So be it. But their commercialism is always in what's around the music. I think that they never, or very seldom, let it really get to the music itself. They have the costumes and the stage production and the album covers and the merchandise. But I think the reason why people hate Kiss in general for their commercialness, commercialism, maybe because they do it in a real shameless and blatant and in-your-face manner, and sometimes they even let it get to the music more than necessary. You know, when you start selling stupid stuff like condoms and caskets and whatnot, you're degrading yourself. You show that all that matters is the money. I don't think you can get an Iron Maiden condom, and I don't think that any Maiden fan would use that, or a casket or some nonsense like that. They have all kind of other merchandising, but all in all, very, very respectable band. And I would say the same thing about Jethro Tull. Jethro Tull was also very commercially successful. They sold millions and millions of records. They had these big bombastic stage productions, but in most cases they didn't let it get to the music, and all the crap and the nasty, dirty things that happened mostly behind the scenes. Something very ugly that happened in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, around that time. I seen Jethro Tull the last time in 2009, I think. He was touring, not with an album, but just kind of like a goodbye tour or something like that. That was the last time that Barre was with him, so I'm very glad and fortunate that I got to see that at that time. I've seen him a couple other times, so that's good. But the way that he didn't continue his partnership with Barre is absolutely disgusting. But even so, I think it was done maybe not super quietly, maybe not super smoothly, but with way less dirt and garbage than other bands tend to do. So maybe they didn't do it exactly like Gentleman. He screwed Barre big time, and he screwed the fans big time, because Barre was an inseparable, integral part of Jethro Tull. And that's also one of the reasons why I never really got into the last two Tull albums, released in 21 and 22 or 23 respectively, if I'm not mistaken. I think the other one was Rockflöte. So the first one was the Zealot Gene. I did listen to the record, but only once, and I don't really remember it, but I want to listen to it a little bit more before I even form an opinion on it, because I'm just too angry at Anderson. In general, I dislike the man, because he has some ideas that to me are abhorrent, but again, I don't want to get into that side of the business and the politics. So Zealot Gene and Rockflöte are the latest offering by what in my opinion should have been labeled Ian Anderson solo albums, but he decided to stick it to Martin and release them under the Jethro Tull name. So sadly and unfortunately, as much as I wanted to end on a positive note, in this case I have to end on a relatively negative note. But let's just say, for the sake of positivity, that both Both bands made some phenomenal music. Both bands are worth listening to and following. And even if you don't want to have all of their records and all of their offerings, but to have the bulk of them, I think is a good idea and makes sense. And joining the two bands together and listening to them together, not at the same time, one after the other or one before the other, but liking both bands, in my opinion, is no contradiction, and they make a good pairing. So again, thank you for listening and staying with me through all my rantings and ramblings. And until the next time, have a good sin.